Welcome into a special open practice reaction show. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Jason Staples. We are always sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Today, Wednesday, in rainy Chapel Hill, though it did slow down a little bit and stop a little bit. Had the opportunity to hear Bill Belichick take the podium inside the Keenan Football Center indoor area, along with the ACC network and the road trip and all that's going on. So a lot going on. What wasn't going on too much was what we got to see at open practice today. They allowed us, the best I could tell, 6 minutes of stretching and roughly 6 minutes of some of the practicing. Jason, your overall thoughts on today? I think when we started this, they're wearing pads. Second full day of pads. That's something.
They were in pads. That they were. We can confirm that the North Carolina football team was in fact in pads today. That's the first and most obvious thing that we can say. But I have to say, as someone who sort of prides himself on being petty whenever given the opportunity, I have to really appreciate the degree of attention to detail put in by the staff and by those involved with the football program in making sure that, for example, when we were watching the offensive line and the tight ends hit the sled, which is one of the individual drills that we got to see at the beginning for those 6 minutes, that the personnel was completely mixed and matched so that no one could have any idea based on that period of who was actually lined up at what positions, what the first team and second team were or whatever. Instead, you'd have a left tackle at right guard, a guy that's probably a third stringer at a different position at left tackle, and so on, working their way up the field, and they were just hitting the sled. And the same thing with other position groups, just going through without any real sense of starters go first, second guys go second, which is often the case in a lot of practices around the country. You have a pecking order where that's just the way it works. That ain't how that worked in today's practice. And I have a suspicion that they made sure, like, we're not lining up starters, we're not lining up second team or whatever. I also suspect that in some of those drills, Belichick actually wants guys to kind of just go. We're just going to get as many reps as we can. And, it doesn't matter who's where. You're going to do this drill as often as possible. As long as you maximize reps, that's fine. But I suspect that there may be a little bit of pettiness, which I really love and respect, about making sure that, look, we're going to let you see what we're going to want you to see, and we're going to show you nothing.
Do not believe what your eyes did not see is basically the theme of the day. But a couple things we can take away, and I do want to talk about Belichick at the podium in a second, because I thought there was some interesting answers there. If you haven't watched that video, check out Spencer Haskell's got the YouTube video of the full press conference up. But quarterbacks, I think it's pretty obvious that Gio Lopez is going to be the starter, barring some sort of injury, and that happens in camp. We feel comfortable reporting that. Beyond that, it was interesting to me, you mentioned the sled and the offensive line. Everybody wanted to see what they were going to do in the absence of Austin Blaske. They showed us nothing. We can tell you this, that they look good in pads.
They look better than they have in terms of the overall composition of the group and the bodies that we've seen on the line of scrimmage.
And Moses Cabrera's been getting a ton of credit over the last several weeks of the work this summer and all that to get this team in shape. It shows at least getting off the bus.
And I want to actually clarify that too. It's not just Cabrera. I think you see the impact of nutrition.
Yes. 100%.
So and actually that was one of the things that was emphasized in their initial release of that camp video. And I think that was deliberate because they want to emphasize that aspect. And that's something that we did hear from various channels coming down from Belichick and the staff when they first arrived, is that they felt actually the first area that could improve, the most obvious area that could improve, was the overall nutrition and the way that the players were eating. They felt that was a problem when they arrived. And we were both kind of like, well, you hear this stuff every time a staff arrives, and there were certain things. I mean, they felt like there was a certain amount of vitamin deficiency that certain players had. And we were just, we off the record were talking with each other, just kind of like, well, we'll see.
Yeah.
Because when a new coaching staff takes over, it's sort of like when a president from a different party takes over. Everything that goes wrong is the last guy's fault, right? That's the way that this works. It's because of the policies of my predecessor. Well, I think if you look at some of the bodies and from some of the guys that were here before.
Yes. And that's a key point because there's a ton that were not.
Right. So you can't compare those guys, but you can compare a guy like Caleb Hood, who clearly today looks the best he's ever looked at Carolina.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to say night and day because he was pretty well built and well put together before. But in terms of how he looks and how he's moving around, I think Caleb Hood looks better than I've ever seen him look in a North Carolina uniform. I think he's probably cut, would you say 10 pounds of bad weight?
I think that's what he said. He said he was down a couple, maybe 10 pounds or so. But look, the appearance is noticeable.
Yeah. I mean, if he's down 10 total pounds, then he's probably down 15 pounds of bad weight.
Yes.
Because he looks better. So that's an example of some of what we saw out there, and some of the guys that have remained. I think you do see some of the impact of that, and then of the guys that they added in. Obviously, depending on how long they've been here, that has impact on them as well. But there's the old saying that the fuel that you have, what you eat is what you become, and you can tell that there's been more emphasis, more accountability, I would say, or maybe just more access to making sure that these guys are able to get to what they would be more likely to be willing to eat. But there are fewer guys, I think, that are going out on Franklin Street and eating junk.
Yeah.
I think that's apparent based on the bodies that we're seeing in pads. That's one of the few things we can take away from today.
Absolutely. And the video Jason referenced was the university put together a video, 30-minute video, sort of highlighting behind the scenes Amber with the nutrition staff and all that. Those folks are doing wonders. At least it appears that they're doing wonders.
The body compositions are better. There's
Yes.
no question.
Yeah, no question that it looks better. On the field, we mentioned quarterbacks, we mentioned the offensive line, going through the reps. They had a ton of guys. Last night on the Over-Under podcast, we talked about 8.5 different guys may start. Over-Under, I said under. They had a ton of them out there working through different reps. What order? Who knows? If somebody reports what order, I'm not quite sure you can take that because what I saw trying to keep notes on it was what Jason said. It was clearly guys getting reps, just getting reps and getting it done while we were there for our 6 minutes or so of practice. Let me ask you a question about Belichick at the podium. I thought this was interesting. He talked about at the podium, install and all that stuff. He said install and what they work on is based on what they can wear in practice. And today was a full pads day, so they were going to work on the run game. Whereas if it was a shoulder pads or shells or whatever, they work on the passing game. Your take on that response, I thought it was a great question by that guy, but also Belichick really opened up when you want to talk ball, scheme, process, and all that.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain questions that, look, the man loves to answer. We've all probably seen at this point, if you're watching this, you're probably one of the people that's interested enough to have gone back and watched his 30-minute soliloquy on the history of special teams. And when he was back with the Patriots, there's certain stuff he just loves to talk about, and there's stuff that he won't talk about because it's strategic disadvantage to give your opponents information of, well, we really feel like this guy's the guy that we're gonna run a lot of inside zone to this guy this year. He's not going to do that, but what he will do is he'll answer questions about process and philosophy and that sort of thing a lot. And I thought he was revealing about what he talked about. He said, well, it's not really that different in terms of NFL versus college in terms of your installation schedule. The biggest difference is what you can do in terms of there are limitations in college on when you can wear full pads, when you have to be in shells, acclimation period and all that. So you have to arrange your installation schedule differently based on what they're wearing. And so those first 5 days, you've got 5 days of acclimation basically, where you're not in pads, you're not able to work the same way in terms of, you don't get a good picture of watching inside zone when guys are in shorts. But you can run a lot of 7-on-7. You can run pass routes. You can do Pascal. You can do one-on-ones with your DBs. You can work on your coverages. You can do all of that stuff in shorts. You don't need pads for that. And so they front-loaded the passing game. And now that they're in pads, they're really pushing, as he said, the running game. And he did clarify, he said, that doesn't mean you don't work on passing game once you're in pads, but it does mean that you focus more on one-on-one pass protection. You focus more on seeing your backs stick their face in there and get a block. You focus more on that stuff, whereas in short stays, you want your backs working on their pass routes.
Yep.
Run in the pads days, you got your quarterbacks handing the ball off an inside run and working on their footwork, that sort of thing. But now in the second really full pads day, he said that they have basically all of their base stuff, all the core offensive and defensive stuff that they're going to run for the year, all of that is already installed. So now it's a matter of evaluating who's going to be able to do what they're asking them to do within that core and do it well, and then evaluating, okay, what can we add to that based on some of the personnel and the bodies and so on that we have. Because one of the things that you hear from all the players who've played for Belichick over the years is one of the things that makes him such a great coach is he doesn't ask his guys to do what they can't do.
Yeah, because that is a recipe for failure.
And we've seen that before.
We have 100% seen that over many years here in Chapel Hill and other football programs as well, but we cover Carolina, is you're trying to have guys do what they just can't do. And that falls on the coaching staff,
Yep.
not the player. Belichick's not – I don't think Belichick lets that happen.
I mean, there's a certain point where you have no choice. If you've got enough guys that can't do some of your core stuff, you're kind of stuck, but you still try to hide it.
Yep.
The main thing now, though, is what he means by core is, okay, these are the base coverages, these are the base fronts, these are base calls. This is what we're going to run most of the time, and this is what you need to know in terms of your assignments. And everything that you do from there is basically a wrinkle or an iteration off of that. And so, okay, if we call this, then for you, that's same as this. And for you, that's same as this. But for you and you, that changes what you do here. So a lot of that is the key. And same thing with the offense. Running game, you're going to install inside zone, outside zone, counter, and power. Everybody's going to have those 4 base runs. And then you're going to have, some other things that you're going to iterate off of those things. You're going to have, okay, inside zone is one thing, but then you're going to have split zone, inside zone. You're going to have inside zone read. You're going to have a variety of different wrinkles off of that are going to shift that. Maybe you have a buck sweep in there. Maybe you have speed option. You have different things that are not part of your core, but they're things that for the offensive line, speed option is blocked more or less like a zone.
Yep.
So for offensive line, you say, okay, look, you hear this call, that's zone. You don't block him. So that's what he means by core. They've got the core installed. Now it's really about installation of some of those other things. And really right now, this is the time of evaluation. Right now, I would say he talked about this as practice 10. They're about 40% of the way through camp. Practice 10 through about practice 15 is where jobs are won.
Yep.
And that's what they're about to determine is which guy is going to put his face in the fan, which guy is going to be a guy we can depend on, who are the guys that show out when we get into scrimmage periods as guys that we know we can play winning football with. That's what the next 5 days is about.
What was the number one thing that Belichick mentioned when he was talking about his running backs?
First thing out of his mouth, pass protection.
And it was that perked my ears because we've heard about that. Omarion Hampton came to Carolina, wasn't the greatest pass protector, but he got in there and he got better at it, and that forced teams to pay attention to him back there. And all this year, Davion Gauss, Benjamin Hall, Charleston French, Caleb Hood, those guys sound to me like if you don't block, you might not play as much as you think you will, and that is a Belichick thing.
Yep, and when I went through my summer evaluations, the one guy that really stood out in pass pro was Hall. Benjamin Hall, when he was at Michigan, That guy was willing and able to stick his face in the fan, and also being 230 plus pounds doesn't hurt, to stick his face in the fan and really take contact and deliver the blow in pass protection and be a reliable pass protector. So that's a guy that I would look at maybe ascending at this point. Caleb Hood as also a nice big body who's got a lot of experience might fit into that, but again, we'll see. I mean, I think he's been a little bit up and down in that area in his career, and Gauss last year as a freshman was a little up and down in that area. They're not going to be permitted to have the downs, or they're not going to be playing as much.
Absolutely. Jason, anything further from today? Obviously, we've got some things written on the board. We're not going to talk about the theme park, the wine, the software company, and all that. They were in pads. We did talk about that.
They were in pads, and we heard about the yoga.
Yes, and I thought that was an interesting question, and Belichick ran with that. Yoga is a form of recovery and all that. You know, a lot of people don't take recovery serious, and then you have injuries and all. It's a focus for this team. Everything, to Jason's point earlier, everything they do, and he mentioned this, everything they do is intentional. Everything is intentionally set to win football games in the end. They're in the process 40% through. Your thoughts on the first 40% that we've seen very little of, but we've talked about a lot?
Well, you know, as someone who's done a lot of strength and conditioning stuff in the past as well, I love hearing about the recovery emphasis, because this is one of those things that in the last couple decades you've started to hear a lot more of from people within the strength and conditioning industry, and that is, you don't get stronger when you're training. You get stronger in the recovery period after you've trained. So among the elite of the elite athletes in the world, the guys who are consistently the best at their craft are guys who understand the importance of recovery. And you don't want to overtrain. And this is something that, when I was younger, when I was 18, 17, 16 years old, I was of the view that more is always better. I'm going to outwork you. You're going to be in the weight room for an hour and a half. I'm going to be in there for 3 hours. And then I'm going to put some encyclopedias in a backpack and I'm going to go run hills. And then and now that I'm much older and a little wiser, just a little, I've learned that actually is not the best way to get stronger and faster. You don't give yourself enough time to bounce back and recover, and you end up not getting as strong or as fast, and you're more likely to get hurt. So what they've done is, and this is really interesting. I mean, you would think, okay, he's going to come in and be a hard donkey. That's his reputation in the pros. If it's his way, and we're gonna, no fun, Bill kind of thing. But the reality is, what he understands is, you're going to only perform your best if it's a work hard, play hard situation. He understands that if it's not fun in certain ways, you're not going to get better because you're not going to focus. And if you're not putting 100% in when you're in, then you're also not going to get better, and you're going to make all the rest of us worse. So what he's really getting at is that emphasis, and you saw this in his answer about the recovery and how much attention they put on that from, contrast tubs and all that they do. The emphasis is on, if we're doing this thing, we're going to do this thing big. We're going to do it well to the best of what we need to do. So when you're working, you work as hard as you can. When it's recovery time, you recover hard and you recover with focus. And then when you're off the clock and you're enjoying being off the clock, enjoy that, but do it with some intelligence, but take that time to reboot. That's something that I think is really interesting to see, and it shows how much he understands sort of the psychology of what's necessary for a team and for players specifically to improve and get better overall.
Yeah, I think the more I watch this and the more we talk about this and the more we see, I'm convinced that talent may ultimately catch up with this team, but the small things will not. More and more every day, that becomes clear for me. There's a reason Belichick teams in the pros were good late in the season. They had great quarterback, but they were also getting better as the season progressed and staying somewhat healthy. comparatively speaking. This North Carolina team has had some slides late in the season for various reasons. I don't see that happening under this bunch, barring some catastrophic injuries or things like that. But anyway, it is all about the details. Belichick, his staff, the entire program's on it. ACC Network here to cover it today. Tons of coverage from inside Carolina. Source, of course, Johnny T-shirt, right?
And JohnnyT-shirt.com. Don't forget, they got the online part.
And JohnnyT-shirt.com. Get you wherever you are. You can get your Johnny T-shirt. Anything left?
You know, they were in pads today.
They were in pads today. That's Jason Staples. I'm Tommy Ashley. Shout out to Inside Carolina for all the coverage. Shout out to the listeners and the watchers for all you guys do as well. Stay tuned for complete coverage and more. And the prediction show next week.
Prediction show of maybe the most unpredictable program in the country right now.
It will be a dart throwing show, and we shall see what happens. I'm Tommy. That's Jason. Everybody stay safe.
12-0 Tommy.